Our guest today is Dr. Seyyed Hossein Nasr. He's University Professor of Islamic Studies at George Washington University. Dr. Nasr is a world-renowned scholar of Islamic and religious studies and author of over 500 articles and 50 books, including The Heart of Islam. Dr. Nasr, good to sit and talk with you once again.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, but as we Muslims always begin everything, it's a wonderful thing to be able to talk to you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I really am excited to talk to you because I think this is such an important time for us to relearn or learn about Islam. Huh?
It certainly is. In a sense, one wishes that nobody even bothered with this situation, but the situation is such that almost everything that occurs, there's an Islamic element in the middle of it, and therefore there's a necessity, whether one likes it or not, to get to know more about the various facets of Islam, the very complicated situation within which it enters into various arenas, political, social, cultural, and otherwise, religious, of course. It's a very, very important time and difficult time in world history today.
Islam, the word itself has a translation, doesn't it?
Yes, it means submission to God. Arabic roots usually have several meanings that cluster together, fields of meaning. And SLM, from which comes the word Islam, you know, all Arabic words are made of roots of usually 3 or 4 letters, usually 3 letters, also means peace. So it really means both surrender to God and the peace that comes from it.
So the surrendering is brings about the peace?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yes.
You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of Buddhism in a way, to accept that there is imperfection and suffering in the world, and part of it is to accept the reality of what's going on.
I would, of course, but also other religions, because ultimately to submit oneself to the supreme reality brings with it peace. Whether one is Christian, Jewish, is Muslim, or anything else, Buddhist, Hindu, anything. But it's expressed in different ways, but in Islam it's especially emphasized. So the is a very central reality that to have a submission is always peace.
Is that what is at the heart of Islam, this idea of submission and peace?
Yes, that's why the name of the religion is what it is. And moreover, in the Quran, not only Islam, as you and I talk about now, that is the religion of 1.5 billion people today, but all religions are called Islam, ultimately. All religions are called submission to God.
Yeah.
And Abraham and Christ are also called Muslim. They're called Muslim in the Quran. It's not only the Prophet of Islam was Muslim, or I am a Muslim, but these two very great figures of the pre-Islamic religious history of humanity are called Muslim also. And so Islam has an even more generic meaning. It means the universal submission to God. From time that God created humanity to today. Whoever submits to God is in a sense a Muslim.
Is there a thought in, let me ask you this question. Is there a recurring theme in the Quran?
Yes, but I would say more than one recurring theme. I think the major recurring theme is the continuous reassertion of the unity of God, the rejection of every other divinity, every other thing taken for divinity. Not every other divinity, there is no other divinity from Islamic point of view, but all the different idols that human beings take for divinity, even those which they do not call divine in the religious sense, but we have a lot of idols that we carry with us. Idols of our desires, of our ideas, of our ideologies, this and that. And the major theme of the Quran is the return to the oneness of God, absolute power, transcendence, will, love, goodness, all the qualities that go with it.
You mentioned idols, and I was thinking of, in my reading, prior to our conversation, Muhammad, as the prophet, goes back to 570, is it? 570?
He was born in 570, died in 623.
So in that era, there was a lot of worship of idols?
Depends where you were in the world. Arabia had been left outside of the grand currents of religion in the Mediterranean world, although there were some Jews and Christians in Arabia. In fact, the Quran alludes to it, the Prophet's sayings allude to it, we know by external history. But by and large, Arabia itself had remained in the condition of ancient forms of idolatry.
And when we talk about Arabia, just paint the picture. What are the countries we're talking about today?
Arabia means the Arabian Peninsula.
Okay.
Today we call the Arab world those who speak Arabic. But it meant actually from today, southern Jordan and Iraq to the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, that is including these small emirates in the south, Oman, Yemen, Saudi Arabia.
So in this area, why did Islam kind of catch on in that area?
From a sort of theological point of view, of course, God never reveals the religion except to a place where he wants to reveal it. Why was Christ born in Bethlehem and not in Benares? You could ask this question, or why was Moses not in China but in Palestine next to Mount Sinai? Why did he go to Egypt, not to Ethiopia? These are, of course, beyond the ken of human understanding for those who believe in God and his will. But if you look at it from the human point of view, this was a very untouched area of human collectivity, and in a sense, something of although there was idolatry, lack of excessive cerebralization and sophistication that had come about in the Mediterranean world and encounter with Greek philosophy and a lot of rationalism, skepticism, nihilism. You didn't have things like that in Arabia. It was sort of simple Bedouin people. They had certain noble characters, but they were, from the religious point of view, idolaters. That's why in Arabic, this period is called the Age of Ignorance, Jahiliyyah. That is, they were ignorant of the nature of reality, of ultimate reality, of the one God. Although among them there were some who worshipped the one God, including the Prophet of Islam.
Hold on that note for just a sec. I tell the folks at home we're talking with Dr. Seyyed Nasr. He is a University Professor of Islamic Studies at George Washington University, and I must say, I know this to be true, he is one of the foremost experts on Islam in America today and respected all over the world. So you want to listen very, very carefully. Sit tight. This is America and the World. This is America is made possible by the National Education Association, the nation's largest advocate for children and public education. Punsan Corporation, forging a higher global standard. The CTC Foundation, AFO Communications, and the Rotendaro Family Trust. Let me backtrack and educate me when I say Dr. Seyyed Nasr. To include Hussein, is it Hussein?
Yes, actually, Hussein is my first name. Seyyed is an honorific name, which is I'm a descendant of the Prophet of Islam. So all the members of our family, for example, are called Seyyed.
So the pronunciation is Seyyed, right?
In Persian, it's Seyyed in Arabic, Seyyed in Persian.
But the first name is important.
Yes, Hussein is my first name.
Hussein.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll call you doctor as well. In Islam, there's no picture of God, is there?
No. In this sense, Islam and Judaism have the same perspective on divinity. Thou shalt not make a graven image, one of the Ten Commandments revealed to Moses, is very much respected also in Islam. One cannot make an image of God because to make an image is to limit. You cannot have an image without limitation of lines or colors or forms or curves and so forth. And God is beyond all limitation.
So in prayer in the mosque, is there a sense, or at home, wherever one is praying, a sense of a feeling or of an intellectual concept?
It's all of those. First was a presence.
A presence.
And then a feeling, and then an intellectual concept. Sometimes a light, a warmth, elements of nature which are symbolic of spiritual realities. Let me give you an example. In the Protestantism rejected also pictures of God in the in Protestant churches, especially Lutheran churches, you don't have pictures of God.
Right.
So when a young boy prays to God, it's not that like he has a statue of God in front of him like a Hindu boy would praying to Ganesh or something like that. So I would not like to call it abstract because it's more than abstract. It's concrete, but not in the physical world. It's a reality which God allows us to experience without visual form.
So when you're in the mosque or praying, do you actually feel a God's presence?
Very much so.
Wow.
You feel very, very much so. You feel standing in a sacred space before God's presence because God sees us. They have a feeling that although we do not see him because he has no form, but we have form and God sees us. So for example, the power of vision. Now, we associated vision from our point of view with the two eyes, with the form of the eyes. But God sees without having physical eyes. So the Muslim is aware of these qualities which our human form reflects, but without the human form when it comes to the divinity.
How do you come by the existence of God? How do you prove that to yourself?
What is the word you in your sentence? Do you mean myself or is Muslim thing? For me, ever since childhood, the reality of God was evident. It was first of all experiential. I used to experience God in my life. And although I went to MIT and Harvard and studied Western philosophy and every atheistic philosopher you can imagine, from Jean-Paul Sartre to Bertrand Russell and so forth, that certitude of God's reality never left my soul. But there are in Islam instruction also for those who are not certain to think, to yearn, to intellect, to use their intellect, of course, to see the signs of God's wisdom in creation, much of it like you have in the wisdom tradition of the West. For a person of vision, the sign of everything, a fly flying in the air, a mosquito, an ant walking on the ground is proof of God's existence in the deepest sense because of the wonder of creation. Everything is so wondrous. Our educational system is very successful in destroying the sense of wonder.
That's a whole other program.
Exactly. In the sense that I'm saying.
Yes.
Where, for example, we think in science we explain, but we explain away, so it's no longer, it's a wonder, but it's still a wonder that a butterfly flies.
Yes.
No matter how much I talk about the aerodynamics and the wing and so forth, it doesn't exhaust that sense of wonder. Now, in our educational system, in the Islamic world, the sense of wonder was always cultivated. And so from my childhood, when I had this sense of wonder and sort of playing in the garden, I felt God's presence. That sense of wonder was not destroyed by the fact that I studied years and years of science and I got a degree in physics and mathematics and things like that later on. That always remained with me.
You say about 1.5 billion followers of Islam, Muslims, right?
That's right.
The word?
Yes.
About how many in the United States? Do we know?
I'm very surprised. For years and years, in the 1980s and 1990s, the figure that was given was about 6 million. And that's how the Muslims had counted it also, between 6 and 7 million. Then a new statistics came out by Pew or something like that. There's only 2.3 million Muslims in America, which I think is totally false. So I don't know on what basis they did the calculation.
How about you and I settling on 5?
No, I think it's the 6, 7 million.
Oh, 6
definitely
or 7?
Correct.
Okay.
You see, there are, of course, it depends on how you define as Muslim. Like you say, there are 2 billion Christians. You include 50 million Christians in France, but 40% are atheists. Those are included by the Catholic Church as the billion Muslim Catholics in the world.
We won't get hung up on the statistics.
So there are Muslims, for example, who don't practice.
Yes.
There are very few Muslims who have become atheists. They're extremely rare in Islam, much rarer than in Christianity and Judaism. But there are very, very few. But there are many who are lax in their practice. Now, do we call them a Muslim or not? Are we only including people who go to mosques or not, for example? So in that sense, it's nebulous. But just in the Washington area, we have several 100,000 Muslims. In the New York area, we have over 1 million Muslims. There's no doubt about it. I know that from knowledge of the mosques and leaders of Islamic communities and things like that. In the Los Angeles area, There are easily over 1.5 million in the greater Los Angeles, Orange County and Los Angeles County. Muslims. Add these all together, it's, very soon it's going to be much more than 2-3 million. I think it's around 6-7 million people.
Perception, reality, or myth, there is a war against Islam?
All three. All three are true at the same time. That is, certain people in the West are trying to carry out a war against Islamic religion. In the old days, when this was not politically important, the people who were carrying out the war were Christian missionaries. They had money from rich people in the United States. They would go to the Islamic world and they would preach against Islam. They were carrying a war against it, but not with guns. By opening up schools and hospitals and injections and trying to have people lose their faith and become Christians.
What was their goal? Why did they feel that they had to do that?
Well, you know, this is a character of Christianity that Christ said, go and preach unto the nations. And so many Christians felt it was part of the Christian duty. Christianity is a very missionary religion. And when it became, although it became itself weakened, but still remained a religion of a wealthy civilization, it began to missionary activity much more extensively. In the Middle Ages, when Europe was much more Christian than in the modern period, there were very few Christian missionaries. In the modern period, when France was producing Voltaire and people like that, it was supporting missionary activity in North Africa because of also political influence that the Catholics could bring to it in Algeria. You have all kinds of very strange things that take place. But in modern times, I'm talking about another kind of war. That is, some people feel that Islam is a threat to the West, which is absurd because it's the West that has occupied several Islamic countries. I know of no Western country occupied and invaded by an Islamic country. If you know one, let me know. It's always the other way around, but the situation is correct. This is a fearful situation. We better put these people down before they come and take over us. So there are elements within American society, more than in Western Europe, but also in Western Europe, in some countries like England and Holland and so forth, and a few in France, who would like to carry out actually a physical war against Islam and conquer it and destroy its power. But that's not true of the whole of the West.
When this film came out and there were these riots in the different countries and people being killed and things like that, clearly to insult someone else's religion is horrific unto itself, you know? But part of the deal in the United States is crazy people to get to say or do whatever they want under the heading of free speech. How can we, when all this happened, what was your reaction?
I will be very frank with you.
Yes.
And I live in this country, I know this country well. Of course, freedom of speech is a very respected right in this country, but it's not absolute. If you go to a Washington cinema in the middle, it starts saying fire, fire, and there's a stampede and 2 people get killed, you're going to be imprisoned. Or on a more practical level, supposing this poster, hate speech in New York, calling Muslim savages, calling the Arab savages, suppose this were done against the Jews. God forbid. Would that ever be allowed? No.
Well,
it would not be allowed because some people have tried it, and the freedom of speech stops someplace, automatically stops someplace. So it's not a complete freedom of speech. But even if we do accept the freedom of speech, another issue which is very, very sensitive and very tragic and sad, I don't care about those atheists in France who have no religion and who want to destroy what remains of religion as a kind of inner urge, which many atheists have, from Marxists to other kinds of atheists. I'm not talking about that. But to have Christians burn the Quran or take joy in destroying the person of the Prophet, what happened to Christian charity? What happened that Christ taught people not to hurt other people? Put aside everything else. That by my act of singing the national anthem of Bolivia, I'm causing pain to 1,000 people, supposedly here in the street. Why should I do that? What happened to human compassion? What happened to love? And then the third point, which is most important of all, which no one brought up in all this debate on the media as far as I could see. I don't have time to see everything. And that's the following. There was a day in the history of the West when if you offended not only Christ, but even the Pope, you'd be guillotined or hanged or burned at the stake in 2 minutes. There's a time when the sacred was the most important thing in Western civilization. Then the West decided to take another path, had its own freedom. Nobody coerced it. 100-year war that occurred between Catholic and Protestant, they both decided to marginalize religion somewhat, and they said human rights are more important than divine rights. We don't talk about divine rights anymore. God will take care of his own divine rights. We take care of human rights. So in the streets of Washington, if you curse at God or Christ, nobody cares. But if you offend someone walking down the street or give hate speech, you go to prison. This is the truth of the matter. Now, so far so good. Every civilization, every society should have the right to decide what course to take. But now the next step is what is really not acceptable. People in the West who say, why are Muslims offended? Are following, by the logic of things, a purely colonial attitude, saying whatever we do is right. And since we decided to put God aside and make humans the center of existence, and imprison people for offending human beings but not for God, what right do you have not to do the same? You must do the same thing. If you don't do the same thing, if you still get angry, you're backwards, savages, medieval, all the things that were even said in the United Nations recently by some people against the Islamic world.
Let me ask this question, and I hear what you're saying. If the rule should be respect and tolerance, for us respecting the religion of Islam and realizing the sensitivity is there, and that the two cultures may not, the two cultures may clash on this point. Do we not have a right to expect that when someone does something and steps out of line and does one of these horrific films or speeches or whatever, that on the other side of the oceans, that those countries will be angry, call us to task, if it's us or any Western culture, but not explode into riots and killing? Is that not a reasonable expectation?
No.
Please tell me why.
I'll tell you. When emotions arise, you cannot, a foreign country cannot set limits on excitement and emotion that people in another country. How many hooligans have killed people after soccer riots in England? Could Pakistan set a limit for excitement in football matches, but don't go beyond, beyond that? That's absurd. Well, because religion is strong, people have great love for the Prophet, and it's not personal. If somebody cursed at them, they won't. And you said you should not angry. That's a religious matter.
So, Doctor, this is crucial for our conversation. What you're saying is that it's so important to a Muslim, this concept of God and respect.
And the holiness of the Prophet, and all prophets.
Yes, that no matter how you slice and dice it, it's unacceptable and will continue to be.
That's right. It's going to cause pain, and for most people, the pain is not expressed in the streets. That's why if Cairo has 50 million people, 200,000 come in the street. The other 40 million also suffer. It isn't that everybody, but the pain is
But Doctor, this is going to happen again.
I know.
I know.
I know. That's a very, very unfortunate thing. Of course, I always give advice to Muslims. Everybody gives advice to Muslims. That every time they do this, you're killing yourself. You know,
gives the religion a bad name?
That doesn't matter, because religion doesn't receive a bad name in this way. It receives bad name by being insulted. And the person who makes pornographic films of Christ is doing a lot more against religion than some ignorant person in Georgia who may do some strange thing that fundamentalists may do, that you in New England or here think to be crazy. That's not the point. The point is much more profound than that. The point is that in the state of the Islamic world today, where faith is still very strong, where in contrast to France, where only 10 to 11% of people go to church, and England, where only 6% go to church, 95% of people in Cairo go to Friday prayers. Whether we like it or not, this is a situation in the world. I mean, in that situation, to insult openly the sacred, what is sacred to that society, in the name of I'm free, I can do whatever I want. That is not going to be without consequences.
Doctor, thank you for the education once again.
My great pleasure. My great pleasure, and God be with you.
Thank you.
To see you.
Thank you. For information about my new book, The Chance of a Lifetime, and online video for all This Is America programs, visit our website, thisisamerica.net. And now you can follow us on Facebook. This is America is made possible by the National Education Association, the nation's largest advocate for children and public education. Punsan Corporation, forging a higher global standard. The CTC Foundation, AFO Communications, and the Rotondaro Family Trust.